Hello, my name is Carrie Jackson, and I am an equity leader with FCUSD. I took the foundation of this presentation from the Sikh Coalition and adapted it to recognize Sikh American Awareness Appreciation Month, which is the month of November, and it is recognized in California. And so any teacher in FCUSD should be able to utilize this presentation. I took the guided notes that went along with this presentation and embedded them in the speaker notes so that teachers only have to go straight to this presentation. And I also included videos and pictures and some other extra materials as well. But everything included in it is approved by the Sikh Coalition. So the first slide of the presentation asks, who are the Sikhs? And so this video was created by the Sikh Coalition and Fresno Unified School District. It is a little over 5 minutes, but it is a run through of many of the things that we'll be going into depth with in this presentation. So Sikhism is a religion. It is the 5th largest world religion. Like Judaism, many regard the religion of Sikhism to also coincide with their ethnic identity. And so there is a little more information that comes later in this presentation about that identification. But it being the 5th largest religion in the world, it's actually very surprising that Americans know very little about it. It is a religion that often is not taught in schools. And what's even more surprising, but also very important, is for us to recognize that we are close to one of the largest Sikh populations in the country. And so Yuba City and Stockton and the rest of the Central Valley have really high populations of Sikh communities. Sikhism is a relatively young religion. It originated in South Asia in an area called Punjab in 1469. It resides in present-day India. However, it really resides on the border between India and Pakistan, but most Sikhs live on the India side of Punjab. Sikh migration to North America began in the 1800s, but Sikhs also moved not only to the West Coast, but later to New York. Many people often assume that Sikhs only recently moved to the U.S., but they have a long history of being a part of the American story. Like many other examples of immigration, the Sikhs have stories both old and recent that are very distinctive. Sikhs believe in the concept of one God, and they also believe that everyone is equal in the eyes of God. No one is considered better or worse than anyone else because they are different, and this goes across gender, ethnicity, race, language, etc. Sikhs also do not believe in rituals, fasting, superstitions, or the caste system. Sikhs believe in the importance of living and earning honestly, serving humanity, and working towards social justice. There is a little more in the speaker notes if you want to get into how the Sikh faith came about and how it was a rejection of the established caste system in India. This slide will get into the Sikh beliefs, which is based on the teachings of 10 gurus. It is based on the sacred scripture known as the Granth Sahib, and it embodies the guru's teachings and guides the Sikhs. This next slide goes over Sikh identity, and Sikh identity can be viewed somewhat like a uniform. And so some things that are very important include creating a sense of belonging and allegiance to the Sikh community, serving as a reminder of the values and behavior that it's connected to, holding Sikhs accountable to a code of conduct, having practical purpose, and enabling Sikhs to stand out and be recognized in order to live up to these values. This slide goes over the 5 Ks, and these are articles of faith. So as mentioned before, Sikhs have certain outward ways that they demonstrate or show their allegiance to their faith. And so this includes kesh, which is uncut hair, Kara, which is a steel bracelet or the iron bracelet, the kirpan, which is significant of protection, the comb, which is significant of cleanliness, and the underpants that are worn under the clothing, which is a sign of self-discipline and chastity. The next slide contains a much more detailed video of the 5Ks as explained by someone that identifies as being a Sikh. So I thought it was appropriate to include after that last slide. This next slide covers the dastar, which is the Sikh turban, and 99% of the people wearing a turban in the United States are Sikhs. And they have very much been mistaken as being Muslim. And so much of this really has to do with the images that Americans were bombarded with in the aftermath of 9/11. Many of the photographs that you see of Osama bin Laden, for example, happen to be with a turban. And so many people just assume that there is an association. Now, the Sikh community doesn't outwardly go out of their way to separate themselves from Muslims, primarily because their main focus also is to promote tolerance and the protection and defense of all religions and religious freedom. And it is not justifiable for any religious community to be persecuted against. And so, much of the reason you don't see such aggressive action to try to separate themselves is because it is wrong altogether, meaning wrong to hold any religious group responsible for those actions. So the turban allows for Sikhs to be recognized, and it's a reminder of their duty to serve God by serving others. And so there is a strong obligation or expectation for individuals to serve the community. It's also mandatory and an obligation for Sikhs. Now, many people identify as being Sikh, even though they don't wear the turban, but a fully initiated Sikh will wear the turban, whether they are identified as male or female. And then also, under no circumstances can the turban be forcibly removed. The next slide that I have included here is of a Sikh American experience. It's a video from Pearson, and it's a really great video about how what it's like growing up in America as a Sikh. And so kind of the process of what it's like to grow up as a child in the K through 12 school system, what it's like to feel a sense of shame and not wanting to stand out, wanting to fit in, and then later in life really recognizing the beauty of that faith and that identification. This next slide gets into the various ways that we might be able to see the turban worn, so different Sikh turban styles, and there is further explanation in the speaker notes on how to navigate that. And then the next slide is a video called Kneel by David Wu, and it's another video about the experience growing up in America as a Sikh American. This next slide covers the Gurdwara, which is the holy site of where Sikhs go to worship. And so it's a place of prayer, service, and learning. Everyone is welcome, and services in America are typically held on weekdays. Again, there are more detailed notes in the speaker notes for anyone that wants to talk more deeply about the Gurdwara. I included a brief history of the Stockton Gurdwara, which is the oldest Gurdwara in the United States. And it was constructed in the early 1900s. It is about 100 years old, and there's just a very interesting story that covers immigration and just the significance of the Gurdwara as well. I think also for a lot of our students, just the fact that Stockton and Yuba, again, with some of the highest Sikh populations, that it is so close to our own community, which, of course, we have many members of our own student body and even staff that identify as being Sikh American. And another service that is unique to Sikhs is called langar, and it surrounds serving a meal. And there is a meal that's served at every gurdwara throughout the world. It is prepared and served by volunteers. It is to ensure that no person, especially those that live in poverty, are left hungry, that they all have access to a meal. So everyone sits together on the floor to share the food in the spirit of equality. There are 80 million people that speak Punjabi, including many Sikhs that live in the United States. There's a little bit more information about identifying as Punjabi, the language, the ethnic identification, its connection to Sikhism that are in the speaker notes. One of the most important reasons that it is important for our students to know about the Sikh community is because of the misconceptions that are floating around. And the Sikh community has been a target for hate crimes, especially in the aftermath of 9/11. And so there are challenges that Sikhs face in America. Hate crimes include individuals that are victims of homicide, assaults, vandalism. And then we also see school harassment, bias-based bullying, name-calling, physical attacks. A few of the videos that I included really speak to that experience. And then workplace discrimination as well. Sikhs are denied jobs in law enforcement and numerous corporate settings because of the turban and beard. The last few slides will show that Sikhs are present everywhere, and that we come across them and see them every day. And it isn't that we may automatically also be able to identify them. I know we talked a lot about the turban and that being an indicator, especially here in the United States. However, there are many individuals that identify as being Sikh, but have not been fully initiated and do not wear the turbans. I think that's important to note. But Sikh Americans are artists, they're members of the military, they're athletes, they're actors and models and entertainers, they're scientists, they're police officers. In addition to that, they are politicians and lawyers and farmers and pilots and doctors and filmmakers and authors. And so this next slide includes some children's books by Sikh authors, to include Fauja Singh Keeps Going, which is about this inspirational 100-year-old man that finishes a marathon, and then The Many Colors of Harpreet Singh, A Lion's Mane, and Super Satya Saves the Day. So there's a little bit more about each of those books in the speaker notes. So all of the resources used in this presentation come from the Sikh Coalition. Please visit their website for elementary and secondary appropriate classroom resources and lesson plans. I just wanted to explain that it was really important to me to use resources and ensure that what is discussed in the presentation is discussed appropriately and accurately and fairly. And so all of the resources, I was careful to ensure that these resources came from this organization. And so I just want to say that there are plenty of other resources that can be used and things that you can bring into your classroom that you can find on that website. So thank you so much for listening. And I think that this will be a great resource for any teacher or educator trying to teach their students about the Sikh community and to bring awareness to the Sikh community this month of November.